Hey guys, Game Pass is ruining gaming. I'm an Xbox fan. I'm a Sony fan. I'm a Nintendo fan. Honestly, that last statement was true. But I love all consoles, and I hate that I have to start every video where, I mention one thing or another, or criticize one thing or another, and I have to defend the fact that, hey, I'm not a toxic fanboy here. I want to have a little bit more of a philosophical conversation looking far off into the future. I'm not talking about exclusives necessarily. I'm not talking about games being taken away from one platform to be put on another, although those are all valid arguments that have people concerned about various things. So for those of you who are not familiar, Game Pass is a Microsoft product that's available both on the Xbox consoles and on Windows PC. And this service allows you to stream a whole bunch of games for one low monthly price. Sounds pretty great, right? We've seen precedent for this in other media, things like Netflix for TV and movies. Well, let's just take a little bit of a look at that. So, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, when we wanted to watch a movie, we went to a Blockbuster or some other secondary video store, and we rented a VHS tape or a DVD and took it home and watched it once or twice, or if you had kids renting cartoons, maybe they watched it 37 times in a weekend for $5, and that was the end of the experience. You rented it, you watched it, you returned it. Well, more recently, something like Netflix or Amazon Prime has come along to provide that in the digital space. And of course, you can pay a $15 a month subscription and you can watch everything known to man on one subscription, right? Wrong. You really can't. It's not all there, of course, and we would love to think that everything we ever want to watch could be under one roof for $15 a month, but that is just not financially viable. Everybody and their brother wants to get paid for this stuff by the millions of dollars. So transfer that over to gaming, and for years we have things like the PS1, the PS2. You go out, you buy a game for $50 or $60 and you own that game forever. The game is complete when it launches because there is no internet, there is no way to update these games after the fact. So a bad game is always a bad game, and a good game is always a good game. You get what you get, and that's it. Along comes the PS3 and the Xbox 360, and we started to get more into a digital landscape in the 7th generation, where we were starting to see digital distribution. It was just a small percentage at that time, but we had things like Xbox Live Arcade, where you could download some of these small little games, little experiences, things like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, for example, the beginning of the indie push, where there was a way for these smaller publishers and smaller developers to release their games onto a major platform thanks to digital distribution. It's not all bad, folks. There are definitely some benefits to digital distribution. The entire rise of the indie scene is 100% thanks to digital distribution. But during that era, we saw people get more and more comfortable with the idea of downloading a digital game. And, people treated those downloads like they were other things in their collection that they owned. I own a physical copy of this game and I own a digital copy of this game. And it's the same thing, right? No, it's not the same thing. So we saw, again, with Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game was delisted. And at that point, you could no longer re-download that game. You couldn't get it from anywhere. The game was gone. So if you had a digital copy of that game on that particular console, you were good to go. But let's say your console broke, you go to a thrift store or a pawn shop, you buy another one, you want to get your digital purchases onto the new console, you couldn't do that. It was lost to the annals of time, and it only recently came back, which so many people were excited about. But that brings us to Game Pass, and that that subscription model. Now, Game Pass is not the only game out there. There are also things like EA Play, which is a standalone service that you can get on things like Steam, for example, but that's also included in Game Pass. And then there's other things like PlayStation just this summer released their PlayStation Plus, the 3 tiers, the basic, the extra, and the premium, where you can get all kinds of PlayStation, first-party games, and quite a good selection of things for one low monthly price. But is that destroying gaming as we know it? Well, not right now, but we're seeing this massive push right now for big studios to gobble up other studios to create these kind of monopolies, if you will. It's kind of a hungry hippos sort of situation where all these studios and all of these IPs are being grabbed up by the highest bidder because they're trying to create these empires of streaming services because they figure that's where the future is. They're looking to the Netflix model and they're saying, we've got a couple of major players in the TV streaming service. We've got Netflix, we've got Amazon in the States, you've got Hulu, and all these other ones try to pop up and fill in these little voids, things like HBO Max or Paramount Plus or whatever, and often those get gobbled up by the big guys as well, or offered as sub-services within the other big guys. For example, Amazon Prime selling channels like Stack TV, for example, where you get a cluster of content for an additional subscription within your Amazon subscription. Of course, you've got the Apple TV. So yeah, this is the landscape that we're looking towards in the next 5 to 10 years as we evolve through this generation. We're going to see a whole bunch of these streaming services pop up. Now, the problem with this is exactly the same problem that we see with the Netflix model, and that is that things come and go and a lot of things start to fall through the cracks. So when Netflix was at its prime several years ago, before all the major competition started to happen, before Disney Plus, before HBO Max and all these other ones started to pop up, Netflix had quite a bit of content. They had all the Star Trek shows, they had Friends and Seinfeld, and this and like quite a bit of network content was on there, and they had deals with Disney to make the Marvel license for all of the Marvel shows that they did on Netflix and stuff. Now Netflix has lost a lot of that content, and Netflix is becoming less and less valuable in the eyes of the consumer. And the consumer now is being frustrated by the fact that they have to subscribe to 3 or 4 different streaming services to actually gain access to the content that they want. And still things are falling through the cracks. And the biggest problem is, as these streaming services get more fractured and they all are less successful than if 1 or 2 major ones had the bulk of everything, a lot of shows that you really want to succeed end up getting canceled. We saw just recently, just last week, the Resident Evil show on Netflix got canceled after its first season. Now, you may say the show was terrible. I actually kind of liked it, but things like this cannot survive in a streaming environment. When you have something like a DVD market, an aftermarket where you can sell special editions and sell physical copies, and they can sell for years on end, it's a totally different thing. With the streaming environment, these companies demand that you are interested in this game on day one, that you engage with that game, that you complete the game, that you put 20, 30, 50 hours, whatever, into that game as soon as it launches. If it's not successful in its first 3 months, its first 6 months, it gets canceled, and that game or that show will never get another sequel. It's just dead in the water. Live service games we're seeing crop up left, right, and center now. Everybody is so comfortable with the always online approach to gaming. These live service games, we've seen Halo Infinite come out, for example. The game was a stripped down, like, shell of a game when it launched. And, they've just been drip feeding a little bit of content here, a little bit of content there. And guess what? People are already tired of Halo and they've moved on before the game is even complete. And now we're seeing this happen right here, right now. They canceled split screen multiplayer, they've postponed season 3, they've canceled some other features, and they still haven't finished the game, and they're canceling features that they announced before launch. So this is the streaming environment. When something is not immediately successful, it falls to the wayside. And this is the philosophical conversation that I really spent the last 10 minutes getting to. Is Game Pass, or services like Game Pass, the streaming future, good for gaming? Or is it good for these companies that want to have a regular paycheck from you day in and day out? Because I don't feel like a lot of those games in the middle of the pack are going to get the attention going forward that they used to. A company like THQ Nordic, for example, that would routinely put out what we call AA games. Those, pretty good games that were made on a lower budget and sold for a lower price. I feel like a lot of those games are going to go by the wayside now in favor of, just like what Netflix and Amazon are doing right now. Amazon just released recently the Rings of Power, the first couple of episodes of the new Lord of the Rings series, and they have spent a ridiculous $60 million an episode on this show. $60 million an episode. It wasn't so long ago that an entire Hollywood movie would cost $100 million, and that would be, like, mind-blowing. Like, that's so much money to spend on a movie. Amazon spending $60 million per episode on a TV show. This is too big to fail. And all of those resources are going into this one show that they are hoping is going to make them billions and billions and billions of dollars. And if it doesn't, it's going to get canceled right off the bat. And you know what? All that money and all those resources that went into that could have made 5, maybe 10 other shows that we could have enjoyed that could have stayed on the air for 7 or 8 years. It's just, I am concerned that as money gets shifted around to make these streaming services attractive, to make these next huge billion-dollar blockbusters, that all of these smaller things are going to fall through the cracks. We've seen it in Hollywood, for example. When's the last time you saw a simple movie at the movie theater? When's the last time you saw something like in the 90s, for example? We had, all of these romantic comedies, Sleepless in Seattle or something. When's the last time you saw a $20 million budget movie that was actually a hit? These days, if it's not a Marvel movie or a Star Wars movie, people don't even go to the theater anymore. It's really hard to get people to even show up for anything less than a billion-dollar blockbuster. And that's the same in gaming these days, and I think that is really bad as these companies conglomerate. They do this Hungry Hippos thing. They eat up all these studios, but then these studios aren't outputting at the same pace that they used to because these mega corporations have totally different goals in mind than these smaller, more creative studios they gobbled up might have. I don't know, guys. What do you think about this future? This kind of dystopian future of 2 or 3 companies owning basically everything that you love, everything, that you hold dear. Do you think this is a good future for gaming? Yes, Game Pass is a good value. Yes, PlayStation, probably the extra tier, not the premium tier right now, but PlayStation Extra Plus, it's a great value. There's a ton of great games there for a low price. But do you believe that that is good for the gaming industry and for consumers long term? Let me know down in the comments what you think. Am I crazy off base here, or am I seeing something coming up in the wind? Thanks so much for watching, guys. Stay classy, would ya, please?